Mayor Triolo, it's 6:02 and we're live.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Thursday, February 28th, City Commission work session to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Pam Triolo.
Here.
Vice Mayor Andy Amoroso.
Here.
Commissioner Scott Maxwell.
Here.
Commissioner Omari Hardy.
Here.
Commissioner Herman Robinson. Here.
If everyone would please rise for the pledge, led by Commissioner Robinson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we've got one item on the agenda today, which is, of course, updates, future actions, and direction, a discussion of community development block grant application for FY 2019-2020. I'm going to allow public comments this evening. For anyone who would like to put a card in, you can do so, but I just want to remind you, this is not a discussion on what we don't want. This is a discussion on, number one, just this item, best usage of the CDBG funds. It's not about what CDBG funds have been used for in the past or how you feel about CDBG funds in general. It's about the best usage of CDBG grant funds in the upcoming fiscal year. That's what we'll be listening to, and that's what we'll be taking your cards on. If you can keep it to that, that's fine. I'll be happy to. If not, your mic will be turned off because we're here just to discuss that one item, okay? I want to keep it positive. I want to make sure that we're putting good thoughts and intentions and ideas out there for the best usage of these funds. And we're going to start with a report from Jerry Kelly on how the public meeting went and the ideas that came out of that meeting for us as a commission to discuss. So Jerry and Mark, once you get up and running, if you want to give us a highlight of your public meeting.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor and members of the Commission, I'm Jerry Kelly, Grants Analyst, and I'd like to start with a brief overview of the Community Development Block Grant Program. It's one of the longest running programs offered by HUD, having its origin with the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. It's also one of the most diverse programs that HUD offers. What happened?
I think you went the wrong way.
Did she not communicate?
Commissioner Robinson, did you have?
I'm sorry, I apologize.
That's okay.
User error.
No, blame it on technical difficulty.
HUD makes these funds available directly to entitlement communities. These communities include entitlement cities, which are those with the populations over 50,000, urban counties with populations over 200,000, and states to run their small cities program. The city, since it is not an entitlement city, has partnered with the Palm Beach County Urban Partnership Program in order to receive its allocation of funding through the county. This is based on the formula that HUD uses. It's based on overcrowding, incidence of poverty, among other factors. And the county does permit the city to get its full formula allocation. We started this current urban partnership with the county in 2014, and this has been extended through 2020. As a subrecipient under the county's program, the city is eligible to conduct certain activities dictated by the county that are eligible under HUD and the CDBG program. And these include eligible infrastructure and public facility improvements, such as roadway and sidewalk improvements, parks and recreational facilities, community centers, and public facilities. And by virtue of the city having a target area for CDBG, we can conduct code enforcement as well within the target area. The county's CDBG program does not allow the city to participate in otherwise eligible CDBG activities such as planning and administration, public services, as they have their own program for that, and housing rehabilitation, because they offer a countywide program. In addition to being an eligible activity under CDBG, the activity must also meet a national objective of the CDBG program. This includes a benefit to low and moderate income persons, the preventions of slum and blight, and a special community development needs arising from emergencies where funding is not otherwise available. On January 30th, 2019, the city conducted a public meeting as part of the public participation required by the CDBG program. Some of the comments that arose from this particular meeting regarding eligible activities included concern over the punitive nature of code enforcement and opposition for the continuation of using CDBG funding for this purpose. There was also support of continuing to fund code enforcement as it assists in the removal of blighting influences, encourages standard and sanitary housing conditions, and provides for the health, safety, and well-being of the community. There was support for land acquisition for the development of new neighborhood parks and playgrounds in areas that are currently lacking such facilities within safe walking distances for residents. Examples were Royal Poinciana, Tropical Ridge, etc. And as an alternative suggestion to these parks, it was mentioned that pocket parks should be considered, community gardens should be considered, and a native botanical garden was also mentioned. There was also support for other public facility and infrastructure improvements such as community centers, new greenways, and so on, and also measures for increased public safety. The estimated allocation for fiscal year 2019-2020 is $294,477. This is based on the allocation that the city is currently receiving through the county. This, of course, is subject to availability of funds from HUD and also the approval of the Board of County Commissioners. The city can only submit one application for one eligible activity. We cannot split and submit two different activities.
Did we have that in the past, or was it leftover
We never
funds?
have. The only exception to that was when we had the special area of Hope, and they let us do additional activities.
Okay, that was, okay.
That's when we had the various parks,
That we, yeah. That's
in addition to the Greenway. And we just learned that submission of the applications are due to the county on March 15th of 2019.
so you better hurry up. No, I'm kidding.
Gotta make a choice.
We better hurry up.
And with that, we respectfully request that you provide staff with direction.
Okay, excellent. Anyone want to start with this? I know that some of the things that we talked about the last time around, I know last year was kind of interesting because we'd never used those funds before in code enforcement, and I do remember last time around saying that we were kind of looking to review it after a year and see whether or not. The one thing that I can say continuously that I've said is that we've used it a lot for infrastructure in the past, and we've almost used it exclusively for infrastructure in the past. I do know, and I checked with Jamie Brown, there are still many infrastructure projects that won't be addressed by the road bond in CDBG zones that I would want to take a look at and have a conversation about. I'd like to go back to spending the money in some of those things. Also, I have heard from several people expressing the need for parks, and if you caught my State of the City address on Tuesday, talking about what's the game plan for parks in every area of the city for walking distance from every neighborhood. So I'm interested in that. I'm just going to throw out what I'm interested in. I guess we'll all kind of have a discussion on it, and then we'll get public response. And I've always been interested in a community center. It's something that we have to go to. The only thing with the parks for me is that is of any concern. There's discussions that I've had with staff about potential city property and park space in the Royal Poinciana neighborhood. That's, I think, underway already. I don't know where that has gone, but I'm very much interested in finding out the status of that. But I'm concerned, and I've stated this publicly a number of times, about a parks master plan eventually here, or to go. We can do the projects that we're working on, but I don't want us to keep going on with parks and not have a parks master plan in place, so we can pinpoint the locations throughout the city so that we are creating parks that everybody can get to, that we're creating safe routes to the parks for the kids, and that most importantly, we have a maintenance plan in place for these parks so they're not subject to some of the conditions that we've had other pocket parks and things get into over the course of years. I'm all for green space, and I'm all for that, and greenways too, if we can't do a roadway project that's needed. I just still think there's a lot of sidewalks. We haven't addressed the sidewalks on South A Street going to the schools with the kids walking, and we have never addressed those sidewalks, and I don't think they're on the $40 million road bond issue, and that hasn't been addressed, and it's a very unsafe area when the buses and the kids are going to school. And so those are some of the things I'm thinking about. I'm tossing it out there to start the conversation. Commissioner Hardy.
Sure, I'll just kind of outline my thinking about this pot of money, and it's influenced by other money that we have available to us, right? So the first thing that I notice is that there's a sort of Venn diagram in my mind between the penny sales tax money and the CDBG money, right? Where they overlap is that they can both be spent on infrastructure, right? And the thing is, the only thing penny sales tax money can be spent on is infrastructure. So it's very, very hard money. The CDBG money, on the other hand, is a little less hard. I'm not going to call it soft money, but it's a little less hard because you can spend it on other things. So last year, when we had this conversation, I said, well, if we have a road bond and if we have penny sales tax money, both of which can only be spent on hard infrastructural items, I said, why don't we, well, put it this way, why would we trickle down on infrastructure with this pot of money when it has other uses that could be available? And I recognized, based on conversations that I had with folks from my neighborhood, that there was a need for additional code enforcement officers at that time. And so what I proposed last year was that we shift and go into a different direction than we had been going in. So that was where the code enforcement idea came from. I think going forward, while there might be some opposition to the idea of using this money for code enforcement, some of it good, some of it specious, some of it based on perhaps a misunderstanding of the regulations promulgated by HUD, by HUD, and also of the legislation that created this pot of money. While that may be the case, I still would like to think of this money in the same way, even if we don't want to use it for code enforcement, which I think is still needed. But if we decide that that's not the direction that we want to go in, okay, we should probably spend it on something that we can't spend the penny sales tax dollars on. Because anything that you might want to do with this money in a CDBG area, you can still do it with penny sales tax money. And you can potentially do that with the penny sales tax money and do something else with the CDBG money. So, some of the things that were mentioned at the meeting, for example, like land banking, we can't do that with this money because it's not an eligible use of the dollars. Land acquisition for parks is fine, but the problem is the pot of money is so small. What we did with the parks several years ago, what you guys did with the parks several years ago, that was because we got a pot of money that only comes around once every 11 years with the Project of Hope. But this is a $300 allotment. You're going to buy 1-2 lots with that, and you still haven't bought the actual park. You haven't bought the equipment. You haven't graded it. You haven't done all of that stuff. And so, if we're going to do this, I would beg us to look really deep into the various uses of this money, and try not to spend it on something that penny sales tax dollars can be spent on.
I just want to answer one of your questions, if you'll permit me to, and then I'll come right over to you, Vice Mayor Pro Tem, is that the spaces that were being looked at for additional parks, or at least the one in Royal Poinciana, was on existing city-owned land. That was number one, so it's not purchasing land, or maybe just purchasing one lot in addition to that piece of land. There's also, they have grants in place to provide playground equipment to cover the cost of the grants for that. And they already were, if you looked in your last budget last year, that park was given a budget line in our budget to fund a park there, and it would never happen. So that's already in a line item budget. So I'm not asking for money that's not there or somewhere else, or asking to spend additional. I'm asking for money that was already line item from our budget to put a park there. and then to have discussions about other areas for parks or whatever, but that, wasn't quite correct. I'm sorry. Vice Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And actually, you shared a couple of my talking points. As you may remember,
I'm sorry about that.
well, that's okay. Several years ago, I had requested funding for a playground for Royal Poinciana, and we in fact budgeted for that a few years back, and we have that money available to us for use for a playground equipment. The lack that we have is, of course, a place to put it. And in the last 2 or 3 months, I think I personally identified a couple potential areas that the city could look at to purchase the land to, in fact, put that playground on. And that's pretty much where I'm going to be focusing my energies as far as getting consensus from the commission to doing, because it's, I think we all agree that on some level that, we need to have some kind of recreation or park facility within walking distance for all of our residents. And there really isn't a whole lot going on in the Royal Poinciana neighborhood, unless, of course, you consider the big massive soccer field we have over there. And that's really not an ideal substitute for a place for the children to play, particularly when they don't have any amenities over there and they'd have to cross the street, a very heavily traveled street. So yes, I think that's, frankly, where I'm leaning as far as my desire to expend this money this year is to identify that property, see if the city or the CRA or whoever can go after that property and see if we can acquire it and place that, preferably a corner lot. That would be our high expectation. The reality of it is, looking at it long term, we do need to get our parks master plan funded at some point and underway, but we also have to be looking at, I think I mentioned this the last couple of times we spoke about sales tax money, we need to be looking at a community center. So there's a lot of things that we need to be looking at, particularly in the western part of the community, that need to be planned for in the future, because when you look at it, the amenities for the most part are not properly and evenly dispersed throughout the county. So I'm kind of going to be pushing for, as I said, the acquisition of the land that we've been struggling to identify to put that playground equipment on that's already been budgeted. So I think we're in many respects, we are well on our way to seeing that playground reality happen. And it's taken a long time, but I think it's finally time to make it happen and put that issue to rest. Thank you.
Hey, Jerry, just one quick question, and then Vice Mayor will come to you. The sidewalks on, and then Jamie's not here to ask, the sidewalks on South A, that's just one of those thorns in my side. Can we check on to see whether they have been added to the road bond thing? And then also, it should be involved in Safe Routes to School, shouldn't it? From the county?
Absolutely.
Through the TPA? That's just a project that's still not getting any better, and that worries me every time I see that, when I drive by there.
I'm sorry, Mayor, what was the location?
It's South A Street, south of 6th Avenue South. The buses, it's a traffic congestion area anyway, but the kids are walking in the middle of the road because there's no sidewalks. Okay, sorry, Vice Mayor?
Okay, let me start with a few things. First of all, I was the only vote against spending this money on code, and I still don't agree with spending it on code. Every time I go to Tallahassee and Washington, we're fighting for CDGB funds. These funds can be pulled at any time. I truly believe that if you're going to fund code, it needs to come out of our general. So I stand behind that. I'm not comfortable with the presentation tonight. In the past, we've always had public comment. We've had public participation, and then staff has put together 3 to 5 issues, so to speak. They've always given us, like the park you're talking about, I'm not familiar with that. I totally support the park in that area. But now we're 15 days out, and we are looking at possibly shuffling to buy some land so we can put a package together for the county. If there's already something there that we own, I'm more comfortable with that. But that's why we need a parks master plan. We need a complete parks master plan so we know exactly what's available, what's going on. And in the future, I'd like to see staff continue with the 3 to 5 items, so to speak, based on what's available in the community. Bless you. If indeed we own some land, we need to look at that first. If we have to buy some land, it's going to be a little harder to do it in 15 days. But I totally support the park, not code, in that area. I think that's all I have at the moment.
And just to clarify too, there was There was initially a piece of land the city was talking about. Juan, you could, but I think that discussions move further, so would you be able to maybe assist in that a little? I know I had the conversation with you, so.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Juan Ruiz, Assistant City Manager for the record. The tract of land that we do own is on the south side of 12th Avenue South. So in Royal Poinciana neighborhood, which is, the area that we've been looking at for a couple of years, is Vice Mayor Commissioner Maxwell pointed out, is not ideal. It's a single lot. It's sandwiched between houses. Then CRA owns a couple other ones that are single lots. Ideally, we'd like to have a double lot that's on a corner. That way we can do lights, split rail. We can build something to code with the proper setbacks and the proper playground elements. Just because we want to do it right the first time. So.
Okay. Commissioner Robinson? I'm sorry, did you want to follow up to
I
that one?
just had a follow-up.
Sure.
So
Vice Mayor?
It sounds to me like the only property we could possibly do it on would be south of 12th, which is not necessarily in the pocket area that we want. But I know that there's greenways, there's other parcels, or do we want to go south of 12th? And if indeed we want to go south of 12th, is that parcel big enough for a park? And does it fall into the category of where we can get the grants, what we can do? The last thing I want to do is promise someone a park and then not be able to put the rest of the park together.
South of 12th East or West? Because we have Domino Park south of 12th East, correct?
Yes, it's, don't quote me on this, it's south of 12th around 7th Avenue South and D maybe? C maybe?
D.
But there is a particular triple lot that's vacant that we are meeting with the owners next Thursday to try to continue that conversation about acquiring that, which is, if I had it my way in Utopia World, that is the perfect spot to put a playground in that neighborhood.
Now, is the 15th, we have to have our package in by the 15th, correct?
That's correct.
If we had a sale pending, that's a purchase area, right?
Yes, it would
If
be.
we had a sale pending, could we write it in such a way that it would be, if worst case scenario, our sale fell through, we could come back? Is that a question we can ask the county?
I would certainly ask the county that question.
Commissioner Robinson?
I'm certainly all about parks, and I don't know that I'm concerned about a park study being expensive. When we have neighborhood associations, we're well aware of vacant lots, and so, when we talk about a park study, I just really don't want to spend a whole lot of money studying it from outside. I want to study it from the neighborhoods up. Some of the properties that we're looking at are already off the tax rolls, and I think that would be a win for the neighborhood and not a loss for the city. And I don't know. I'm familiar with one of the areas that are I think ideal for Royal Poinciana. I think we can do both. Continue our funding for code and spend the penny sales tax on park purchase. They're both needed for quality city. What we do need to do is, if we decide to spend it, to continue spending it on code, is make some serious adjustments on code practice and methods and approaches, and keep in mind their goal. I'm concerned about its effectiveness if it's not welcomed. We don't live in a bully state or a police state, and that's not the purpose of code. Code has been needed, and I want to continue code. And if it has to be through CDBG, I'm good with that. The penny sales tax would be an appropriate expense for purchase of land for parks.
Okay, just want to remind the commissioners too that we're only discussing, and to everyone at home that's just joined us, we're only discussing your wants for usage of the CDBG funds. We're not talking about code enforcement. There's only one item on the agenda, and it's how should we use the CDBG funds, not how we
Well-
shouldn't use them.
But we are using CDBG money now for code.
Correct.
And so I think it's appropriate to mention it, right?
Well, it's knowledge. It's public knowledge. We're looking for the future. We're not going back in
And-
time here. We're looking
well-
for where does CDBG money get used in the future? That's the
And-
question.
Yes, and with the understanding that we have been using it, and
I just don't
my-
want I don't want this to be a code discussion. This is not what we're here for. We're here to be positive and create where the allocation of dollars will go, so we can give Jerry the direction he needs to apply for projects with this fundage. This isn't a bitch session about whatever. This is basically a session on where do you want the money to be spent and what projects you want to happen. Thank you. Vice Mayor Pro Tem, did you have your?
No,
Commissioner Hardy?
actually, Juan took care of mine.
Okay, Commissioner Hardy?
Am I allowed to ask whether the way that we have used the CDBG funds over the last 4 months, 5 months, has that been effective? I think that would inform our position on how to use funds in the future to determine whether what we're doing right now has been effective. My other question now, and these are about the triple lot that might be available in Royal Point Sienna. Do we have a price tag on that lot?
No, we do not.
Okay. So, when you say triple lot, you mean 100 feet wide or 75 feet, triple, what's the basic lot size there? Triple what?
There's three contiguous lots that are, I don't know the dimensions off the top of my head.
Okay.
Mark, what's a typical lot size down?
To 25?
There,
It's-
it's about 50 by 135 is a typical lot.
Okay.
They vary in size, less than standard.
Okay. So we don't know how much. Do we know whether they'll be willing to get, whether they would agree to a sale and then wait to get paid until October?
I should know more Thursday.
Okay. If they are not willing to agree to a sale sometime between now and the 15th and then wait 7 months to get paid, are we allowed, per what HUD tells us to do and what the county wants us to do, to just go ahead and spend the money and then repay ourselves with CDBG funds after the fact?
Or we could use sales tax money for the acquisition,
Right.
which would qualify as an expense, and then use the CDBG money later.
To backfill.
Right.
So we're allowed to
Is
backfill.
that possible, Jerry?
I don't believe that it is.
Okay.
The money cannot be spent before.
Right, right. So
But I'll ask the county that question as well.
that's my understanding as well. But we can always double check that. So this kind of goes back to my whole point, is that whatever we can do with CDBG funds as far as parks and all that stuff, we can do much more nimbly with sales tax funds, and we can do it at a much grander scale. And I think the reason why we don't want to do it with sales tax funds is because all of us have a priority for the sales tax funds, and I think that we're afraid that if we don't use CDBG funds for a park or whatever, that one of our priorities, whether it's a parking garage, whether it's a pool, whether it's roads, or whether it's whatever, is going to get squeezed out. But to me, we can do, whatever, we want to do with a park, we can do literally tomorrow with penny sales tax funds. We don't have to ask the county. We don't have to submit an application. We can be much more nimble, and we can do it at a much greater scale because we're not limited to $294 $294,000 that must be spent within a 12 to 24 month period. We can do it kind of on our own time and with our own vision in mind. Whether we use CDBG money for code enforcement or not, to me, I think if we're talking about parks and stuff, I think the penny sales tax fund is a much better way to do it. And so, again, I would kind of plumb the regulations for CDBG to see what can we do that isn't already covered by the sales tax fund.
Vice Mayor Pro Tem?
I just kind of hope to go to public comment.
That's where I was going. Commissioner Robinson, did you want to say something before?
No, I'm just in favor of using the penny sales tax for parks.
Okay. First up, Kara Jennings, followed by Todd Townsend.
Good evening. I understand you're under. I don't believe that's required, but they already announced my name.
Actually, they are, for public comment, they are now required, unfortunately.
Okay, Kara Jennings, 822 North C Street. I hope I'm not docked that time.
No, we'll start right now.
Okay, great. I understand you have a deadline of the 15th, so we don't have that much time, and it's unfortunate that there's not a shovel-ready project. And I'm a little confused if you have all this penny tax sales planning that you've already been doing, then,
No, we haven't.
okay, so that's why you don't have a shovel-ready project.
So we don't go back
But I was at the meeting, and there was it was almost unanimous that everyone at the meeting preferred the money to be used for parks. And not that some people didn't also support the code enforcement, but I was surprised. People I don't traditionally agree with were, very upset about the code enforcement use of CDBG grant funds versus use for something that's, really can raise the whole neighborhood, which is infrastructure. So I understand that you have other funds, but we also know that the city was neglected for a very long time, and we have endless projects. So it's great that you have multiple funding sources, and I would hope you'd use the CDBG funds for an infrastructure project. The current use of the funds is pretty horrible. And to use money that's supposed to specifically address low-income families and use it as a punitive code enforcement program, to me seems like the total opposite intention of the funds. The code enforcement program currently is red tagging cars, towing people's vehicles off their public property. Private property. Well, you have two commissioners who are advocating for the use of the funds for the continued program, so it's impossible not to comment on it. So I think it's really a horrible use of funds, and in fact, I would encourage you to have a workshop with public comment just to address the current use of the funds. Every time I go on one of these Lake Worth Facebook pages, I see another video of somebody upset that their car got towed off their property from the red tag program. So this is really a big issue. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Todd Townsend, followed by Christian, Mariah? Manaya, sorry.
Hi, Todd Townsend, 502 South J Street. As we've been talking about that intersection at the corner of A and 10th, we know that's a really bad intersection there. We've had people try to put stuff there. People want to put stuff there with parking and stuff like that. We know that's a bad idea. That area should not be used for anything having to do with cars. There should be no ins and outs in that space whatsoever. That should be a space where we build a really nice park, and that would be a good spot to put the playground and maybe some kind of some pretty sculpture or something that says welcome to Lake Worth, home of the tropics, whatever. But that would be a really good spot to build a park. I think that we already own that land, and we don't want roads, we don't want any cars to be going into that area there. Thanks.
Thank you. Christian, Mariah, followed by Javier Del Sol. Welcome.
My name is Christian Manaya. I live at 429 North D Street, which is in the zone for the funds. I was also at the last meeting. I think that, again, I'm going to echo what people have said. I think it was almost unanimous that people were really against the use of code, and I really think that you shouldn't restrict people to talk about what it's currently being used for, since 3 of the commissioners have brought it up. So I don't think that's fair. I'll reiterate what I said at that meeting, and I really think it's up to you to listen to the demands of the public. We think it should be used in parks. I think it should be used in parks. It should be used for pocket parks. I don't think it's an either or. If you have money from the penny sales tax, they could be lumped together. You could work together on something right now and then add to it. Again, gardens, parks, greenways, even just doing more projects on the greenways. The children are playing in those greenways right now because they don't have parks. It's really sad. If you could add benches, I don't know, it's just anything but what it's currently being used for. I just want to keep advocating for that. I don't think it's right. It's punitive. It's hurting this community locally here. I mean, I'm a working class person. I use sometimes vehicles that might be unsightly. My yard might look slightly unsightly, but I try to do my best. I think everyone here is trying to do their best, and it's not fair that you are punitive to the members of this community that are hardworking individuals. So yeah, that's what I think the funds should be used for. Thanks.
Thank you. Javier Del Sol, followed by Tuesday Gilliam.
Good afternoon. Javier Del Sol, 205 South L Street. I've been a resident of this town for about 42 years. And when I first got here, I think we had about 17,000 residents. So it's increased. But I don't think we've kept up with green spaces. Even though they say we have not, because I challenged this years ago and I made the case that they include the golf course. How many of us go to the golf course? Only a few people go to the golf course. You can't include that in green space. So take that out. When you take that out, you don't have enough green space for most people in the city. We need to increase the housing stock for people that can afford it. It's not just affordable, but attainable. So why don't we get a land trust? And there's a lot of models all over the United States. I don't have to be here to tell you that. It's well managed. Just like you give the For the Children at least for 100 years, you give a land trust to someone there in the city, a nonprofit, and you have gardens close by and parks, and they kind of manage it themselves. This is what you want. You have citizen participation and democratic, and everybody's involved in the decision-making process. And this can happen. There's models all over the United States. So just keep in mind, you can have a comprehensive land trust with parks, botanical gardens, and community gardens. And when I was growing up, we had a toy loan. And most of the low-income kids couldn't afford toys, so they had the park had toy loans. And you take out a little Tonka truck, and if you came back with the 4 wheels on it, you got something bigger, and you got that thing with it. You came back, you got something bigger. You always had a toy loan, so you don't have to own your own toys. You could, have that and sit in the city parks. And just think about this: recreational aids in the parks. Somebody to have caroms and volleyball out there for the kids. We should put that on a budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Tuesday, followed by Anna Maria Windish Hunt. Tuesday?
Tuesday's not here.
Okay. Okay, Anna Maria, followed by Noam Brown.
Can I borrow my card? Because
Sure.
I'm back straight. Thanks.
You got
Because
it.
I have numbers here.
You got it.
Okay. 404 South C Street, Royal Point, Siena. Several months ago, we had visitors from the Guatemala Center. And I'm not speaking for Tropical Ridge or the other neighborhoods. I don't know anything about them. But we have in our community around 600 homes, approximately. I counted 400 to 600, and then the industrial area. And according to the Guatemala Center, we have 300 families that live that are, I don't care if they're documented or not, it's not my business. They are actually living in my community, okay, that they know of. Now, I know a couple of houses that are split in half, so we're not talking about who's who. And what they represent to me is a lot of children. The average American is 2.5 children. I'd say they're closer to 3.5, 4, okay? Times those families is a lot of kids, and they're all under 12 years old. I spent 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 38 seconds yesterday with Comcast trying to find out how many of these families are actually getting that $10 Wi-Fi. They won't tell me. Anyway, so what I'm looking for, which is infrastructure, which would not just benefit us, but literally the whole city, is Wi-Fi. These kids, most of them will not go outside. The parents are afraid to let them out. I understand it, but they all have television. They all have telephones and things like that. So I think that's something that we could really utilize. And they're so smart, these little kids. They know how to push those buttons. And they could learn a lot from just having that access. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Noam Brown, followed by Flavia Franco. Flavia, you're on deck.
Noam Brown, 1701 North D Street. Yeah, I just want to also speak in favor of the sentiments about building parks. That was definitely the overwhelming sentiment at the meeting about the brainstorming, or whatever the meeting was called, about the CDBG funds. And it is difficult not to be I don't know, allowed or be suggested
you can give
not
an
to
overview
talk
of it. I
about
just didn't want it to be
something that a couple of the commissioners are suggesting to continue these funds for that. It's been said, and it's problematic. I do have a concern also just about the process, because I checked out a very short slideshow from HUD about how to spread the word, like sort of guidelines or guidance about how to spread the word to get input from the community about how to spend the CDBG money. And they specifically, my phone is either dead or about to die at 1%, but I have, one of the slides, if it doesn't die on me, like, applicants must make every effort to inform those who might not be reached through the newspaper. That's one of the slides. There are several slides. There's only like 15 slides in the whole thing, maybe 16. But there's several slides that really make it very clear that putting it in the Lake Worth Herald 2 times is required, but it is definitely not the only, the admissible only way to spread the word. And it also needs to be in multiple languages, and it's specifically, they spell out that it's specifically for low and moderate income residents of whatever city is applying for these funds. I would be curious to hear what exactly the steps were taken for that. So,
Thank you. No. Flavia Franco, followed by Ernest Irvin.
Hi, thanks for having us all here. I feel like this is a little bit repetitive based on our meeting that you led last month.
I'm sorry, Flavia,
Yeah.
just state your address, please. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Flavia Franco, 417 North B as in Boy Street, Lake Worth. I appreciate you all having the time to have this meeting today. Very grateful for every one of y'all's presence. We were there last month with you and with Commissioner Hardy at that other meeting where we all brainstormed great ideas. And the main subject of that was parks, sidewalks, the land trust, and everything positive. That said, this Operation Red Tag, it's ridiculous. Like, I don't know who suggested that, who is for that, but it's not for low income families. It's not for working families. I think it's, in fact, beneficiary to people who have money, who do not want immigrants and low income families and people of color in this community. So if that's where you're going towards, if you want to kick out immigrants, if you want to kick out people of color out of our communities, please go ahead and use it for Operation Red Tag. But I am completely against fining people to tow their cars. It's outrageous. That said, I am for parks and recreation and positive things. That's what the Community Development Agency Redevelopment Grant is supposed to be at. And I hope that you can forward that thinking and not side with developers and people with money, because we clearly don't have the money, but we want that park and sidewalks and all of those positive things. So I hope that you can really hear where people tonight are coming from.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Ernest Irvin, followed by Kathy Turk.
How y'all doing tonight?
Good, how are you? If you just state your
Ernest
address.
Irvin, 311 North B Street. What I don't understand is how do you have one department magnified and the other departments are down here? And what I mean by that is, like everybody's saying, you have code enforcement out here, tagging people's cars and towing cars, but your streets are terrible. I mean, I had to call in and literally say, you guys got to replace my car if it get hit, because there was a big pothole and my truck is sitting here and people are trying to go around this pothole, they about to hit my car. So I don't understand that. I don't understand how you got code enforcement way up here and the streets. I mean, and North D Street is terrible. You need some speed bumps. Not the kind of speed bumps that are like a ramp. Not those kind that the kid, like we could jump, right? We need some serious speed bumps that's gonna make you stop. Because I guarantee you, if you put a police officer there, by the end of the week, he'll meet his quota. I mean, I could be in my house with the windows up, down with the AC on, and I can hear the cars, and I can tell you how fast they're going just by listening to them. I mean, they're flying. Somebody's gonna get hurt. And if you go, I know everybody been on D Street, before you get to 10th Avenue on D Street, you can't even hold a cup of coffee in your hand. I mean, it's terrible. So we need to, infrastructure, it needs to be, I'm not trying to take away from the parks, I'm not trying to do that, I understand that. But the infrastructure, it's terrible. I mean, I don't know if any of y'all live in Lake Worth, I don't know that, but sometimes if you don't live in a place, you really don't care. You understand what I'm saying? You really don't. And I've called streets before to you know, about one pothole, and it's so hard to get a hold of them. You know, I feel like this, I shouldn't have to do that. I feel like if code enforcement is riding around looking for things, the streets, the people who do the streets, the guys, they need to ride around and look for potholes and stuff like that. A leaking meter, that's different. You can't see the leaking meter. But you can see a pothole, I mean, it's terrible. So, okay. But
thank you,
streets, please.
Kathy Turk, followed by Nick, I'm sorry, it's very light. Paliugi, sorry about that, forgive me.
Kathy Turk, 901 North B Street. So I was at last year's CDBG meeting. It was just a handful of us. One of us, it was me and Sarah Parr. I think my son was in town. And we did talk about this. At that particular time, we didn't have code officers in our area. And there were safety concerns. Not car registration, we're talking safety concerns. And we sat there, and again, we were under the deadline, just as we are now, and agreed to, you know, let's do this. But we also, both Sarah and I turned around and said, can we start on CDBG for the next year after you drop the last one? Because Sarah specifically wanted Tropical Ridge Parks. I'm sorry, Royal Point Sienna Parks. So keeping this as positive as possible, I do think that we need to have the parks there. I first would say sidewalks. If kids are walking to school in the streets, that's a safety concern. We don't even need to worry about play. I would go sidewalks, parks, and shovel ready. There are a lot of dirt roads right now that could use greenways. I personally live on one. 9th Avenue is dirt right now. There are other ones in the community, and those could be shovel ready. They come in underneath the budget. We know they do, and that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick? Paliugi? I get it all right. Thank you.
Nick Paliugi, 429 North D Street.
Thank you.
I want to echo the parks, all the things we already said, things that everybody likes that actually benefit the community. But I want to also say, I watched this video last night. It was your visioning session from 2018. And there were some obscene things said by Commissioner Maxwell about how are we going to replace the demographics in these neighborhoods. He says it right out in the open.
Yeah, just keep directed to me. Thanks.
Yeah, and what does that even mean? You know, I mean, that says it all right there. So Operation Red Tag, that doesn't harm slumlords. That harms renters, some of the most vulnerable residents in this community, and it's just obscene. So this is kind of a farce to me, because I feel like you're going to use the money for code anyway. You know, that's kind of where it's going, because there's no shovel-ready projects. So until Operation Red Tag is ended, I mean, I'm going to keep coming back here, and people are going to keep coming back here and giving you all hell, because it's wrong. You can't steal people's cars.
If we can, what else would you like to see it spent on?
Parks. I mean, 6th Avenue South is a pretty crazy street to cross.
It is.
You know, up a traffic light, you know, just anything besides punitive things, you know?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Irwin Sirens. You guys are making it really hard for me with this. Followed by Michael Fox. Just state your address, please.
Yeah, Irwin, 1212 Lake Ave. Quick question. I wanted to ask, can the money be used for things like creating an account for some type of rehabilitation program, as far as like homes, like for elderly to fix roofs or things they may have going on? Can it be used for that?
Jerry, if you would.
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Could the money be used for like some type of housing rehab program for like the elderly to fix roofs or issues?
The county has its own housing rehab program.
No, but can this grant be used for that?
No, it cannot.
Oh, it can, okay.
We get the funds through the county, and they will not let their subrecipients do their own housing rehab program because it would compete with the county-wide program.
So we'd have to petition the county?
That's the county's instruction, yes.
Okay. The penny sales tax, is it only for existing infrastructure, or like things like buying a lot, you could use it for that?
We don't usually, yeah, we don't go back and forth usually between the, for Q&A with
Oh,
residents.
I
But I'd
can
be more,
ask them.
I'd be more than happy though to sit down with you afterwards and go
Okay.
through, answer all your questions with staff.
Oh, so you don't answer questions?
Yeah, we
Okay,
don't usually
okay.
go back and forth. It's usually like your statements.
I got you. Well, never mind. All right, thank you.
Thank you. But if you wouldn't mind, Juan, would you please get with him and chat with him about, okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Michael Fox, followed by Rodolfo Plancard. Is that right? I'm sorry.
How many more cards do you have?
I'm Michael Fox. I live at 1609 North D Street. Madam Mayor, I've been away for a while. I'm only in town now 5 or 6 days a month if I'm lucky. But the Foxes, we have founded Fox Palm Beach Financial Lending Company. Things are going well. Having said that, I want to use the words of the late Commissioner Loretta Sharp, and I keep saying them when I come here. She said, "I must be losing my mind. I can't believe we're still talking about this." Okay? So I don't really want to relitigate anything that I've been through with the city, which you're all aware of because you lost and you're exposed badly. Okay? And you can agree with me on that. But I just want to caution you about what possibly you should be aware of. You're uniting people that have very little in common against you. That's a difficult position to put yourselves in. People are coming here from out of town and from Washington, D.C. to pay attention to you all and how you're treating us. And anyone on the dais, or any candidate for that matter, who thinks that how we're being treated is appropriate, well, you're zeros. You're nothing. You're the help. And you need to understand that. And if you don't understand that, then you also just need to understand that we are revenue and you're overhead. And everybody else in the city is overhead as well that are staff.
Would you like to see the money spent for CDBG?
I would like to see pedestrian walkways built. Why does the Tri-Rail station have 26 of them and we still have pedestrians being killed?
Thank you. Rodolfo Plancard, and followed by Penny Darling.
Hello, Rodolfo Plancard from 5004 Northwest 5th Street, Delray Beach, Florida. I'm here with Palm Beach Tenants Union. Hopefully, Hardy, you don't walk out this time. But you know,
Direct towards me if you can.
I'm going to repeat everyone that said I come from Delray. Delray, brings in everyone in through parks, gardens, sidewalks, culture events. What you guys are doing is the opposite. You guys are targeting a demographic group, like 60,000 above or something like that, which I think it's ridiculous because there's a lot of Delray Beach citizens that don't make that amount, all right? And I've done business here for 8 years when I had a business in Delray through a bakery. So there's good people here. They're hardworking people, all right? And they deserve respect. What I heard from Maxwell, that was very disrespectful. I'm sorry. You don't talk that way.
Direct towards me. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I get to take all the joy.
All right. I'm very surprised nobody stood up for them. I'm very surprised.
I did.
So that's all I'm gonna say for now. But if you guys want to attract the 60,000, you guys want the progressive families. All right. You're not gonna get them from the deep south. That don't have that kind of money. You're gonna get them from the northeast. All right. They're progressive people. They don't want to live in an area that's hostile and racist. That's all.
Thank you. Penny Darling.
Good evening. I'm Penny Darling, 1701 North D Street. I would like to reiterate and reinforce all the ideas for the green spaces, the parks. I love the toy library and the recreational aids in the parks idea is fantastic. I also want to touch on the responsibility each of you have to represent every person in Lake Worth, regardless of color, regardless of language, regardless of nationality. Every one of our residents here is a strength to this city, okay, regardless of where they're coming from. Income level does not dictate someone's value. So we need to make sure that these dollars are supporting and uplifting the people who need the support and the upliftment the most, so that they can feel welcome, they can feel supported, they can have great spaces for their children to play and be enriched. This is a really big responsibility for each and every one of you. So I encourage you all to come with a spirit of unity, of bridge building, really increasing your efforts to reach the lower income families and the families who speak languages other than English, to really get them in the room. And, you know, I guess it takes brainstorming to do that, but I'm very confident that you all are able to do that. And I'm sure many people here would be happy to help. We have people who are representing various languages spoken in this room. So thank you, and I encourage you to move forward with the great encouragement of providing these parks and uplifting services.
Jerry, question for you. Voting for, it seems like we have consensus up here for at least proceeding with the discussion, well, at least a discussion about the park spaces that we had discussed prior to public comment. What can you say that we could be ready for? What projects? And that's where I think one of the commissioners asked that before. You know, in past CDBG funding sessions, we've had kind of choices to make of projects that you could, shovel-ready projects that you could at least immediately meet the deadline for to apply for. Is that park in Poinciana place, is that a project that, Juan, you said based on your conversation that you'll have later in the week, is it something that we could meet deadline on?
I think that we should be able to, yes.
Okay.
The actual building of the actual playground structure is shovel-ready as it ever can be.
Okay, so that's there. It's just a matter of the
Where
discussion
to
on
put it.
that specific land, and what happens if that we can't acquire that specific land.
Well, in general, we'll continue to seek out, the appropriate lot. As far as the CDBG conversation is kind of.
So we're okay for the application process for that, even if it has to switch locations?
Also, Mary, the county's been very, we have a good working
They've been
relationship with
terrific
the
with us in
county.
the
We've
past.
been able to amend
Yeah.
through the application prior to October.
Okay.
So that's never been a problem in the past with them.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to misspeak, Jerry, it's a 3-year period to get it completed, right? It's a 3-year?
There's a 12-month period to complete the actual activity.
Yeah.
But in the instance of land acquisition, you have 12 months to acquire, but you have a further obligation to develop, to complete all the improvements within a 12 to 24-month period.
Okay.
So that's your 3 years.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Hartley?
What I'll say is this. There are lots of things this money could be used for. I think going forward, it would be great if we did a few things. And this is done in the Northeast. We should establish a CDBG committee. The committee should be composed of people who are predominantly from the CDBG target zone. The CDBG committee should meet beginning 6 months out of when the county tends to take applications, which is February to March. And the CDBG committee should be, first of all, educated and informed as to the regulations promulgated by HUD as to how this money could be used. And then the CDBG committee, I think, should be tasked with finding eligible uses for this money within the CDBG target zone and advising the commission on how this money should be spent. And I don't think that's a waste of anyone's time. We might be the only city in the county that would do it that way, but certainly there are other places in the United States that do it exactly that way. And I think that might, first of all, get us thinking about this earlier in the year, earlier in the application cycle. Second of all, I think that might solve some of our problems with public outreach. And thirdly, I think that whatever the result is that comes from that would be broadly, more broadly acceptable to the community that is affected by how this money gets spent. Just to clear up a few things, I am obviously a person of color, okay? I obviously do not agree with the idea that anyone up here wants to push out people of color. I have taken some heat from people up here and from people in the community for bringing statements about what at least apparently a majority of this board values about welcoming people regardless of where they come from, their immigration status or what have you, regardless of their race, regardless of their sexual orientation or what have you. And so while I recognize that people might have very legitimate concerns about how this money has been used in the past, I do not recognize as a legitimate concern the idea that we used this money to target low-income people, people of color, immigrants, documented or not, to drive them out of the city. We used this money in the past in response to complaints and issues brought to us by homeowners and other residents, including renters, in that neighborhood. So I just, when I said that there was some specious opposition to that, that's what I'm talking about. I have seen communities where I grew up in Fort Lauderdale beginning to gentrify. I understand what that means. It does not make me feel good. I do not want to see people in this community displaced or code enforcement used as a vehicle to displace people. However, and the argument goes the other way, there are people who live in this community that say, you know what, if this were Lakeside, you would never let people get away with this, right? With the vehicles on flats and with the vehicles on blocks and with trash in the yards and with fences that are dilapidated and leaning and falling down and with all of those structural as well as, the general appearance of that. And I think as we have enforced code elsewhere in this city, I think there needs to be a sort of uniformity there. So that's just something that I wanted to clear up. I have to go, but I just wanted to clear that up. I'm okay with the idea of parks. I would prefer, frankly, that we really get deep into what this program can be used for and don't duplicate uses between penny sales tax and CDBG. But if that's not the will of this board, there are other non-infrastructural uses other than code enforcement. But if that's not the will of the board, then I understand that. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Did you want to speak? Because I know you have to go too. Going back to the agenda item, once again, I do not support spending CGB money on code. I support the idea of moving forward and directing this assistant city manager to talk to the owners of this particular park. However, I also recommend that staff look at sidewalk projects, greenways, and crosswalks in the identified areas that the public has spoken about and that we have spoken about, so we have a clear backup. I also recommend that when we first got elected, there was lots of CDBG funds sitting there not being used, and there was obviously some kind of extension or something given. So I would ask the county about an extension. So if we need a little bit more time on the parks, or we can't make the park happen and we need to identify these other shovel ready, will they give us a little extension past the 15th?
They have in the past, and I'm sure they'll consider doing it again.
That's my recommendation. Try to move forward with the park. If for any reason the park can't happen, sidewalks, North A Street, greenways, and crosswalks. And we could talk about crosswalks in so many different districts across the CGB funds, but we know 6th Avenue South, and again, crosswalks, some of them, 6th Avenue, 10th Avenue, it's DOT, that's a big fight, but some of it can be as simple as paved crosswalks that are designated with the signs and something else that is more creative that will help with some of these issues we're having. That's my recommendation.
Commissioner Robinson?
I've already stated that I would like to do both. We haven't earmark anything in the future for penny sales tax. We're talking about less than 300,000, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what do you estimate a park to cost? If it's on a 3-lot corner that we've, in Royal Point, Sienna?
I can't speak to the cost of the land because we haven't had that conversation, but the budget in our current CIP, I think it's 85,000, which is sufficient to build the actual structure, to acquire the structure and build it.
Very good. I still would be very comfortable in using the penny sales tax to do that. I think it's disrespectful to raise the standard of our city and ignore certain areas of the city that require attention. I just, to assume that we're not all responsible for raising the standard of our city is disrespectful to people that need help, and that our approach to and this isn't bitching. It's a notice that code is attempting to raise the standard. What we need to do is address the method and the approach and the flexibility that they do that. I'm sort of offended that I don't have an empathy for people that have a flat tire. I do. And if we can create a fund out of the code fines to benefit somebody that needs help, or or even a shop area that could be used to raise the standard. I would like to see the park in Royal Point, Sienna. I would like to use the penny sales tax to do that and continue to raise the standard for everybody in Lake Worth. And that doesn't mean targeting anybody, it means raising the standard for everybody. We will be better off if we raise our standard. I would much rather be poor in a rich town than poor in a poor town. And if we continue to lower our standards, we will continue to be a poor town. So it's to everybody's.
Quiet in the chambers, please.
It's to everybody's benefit to
Quiet in the
raise our
chambers,
standard.
please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What did you want to spend the CDBG?
So CDBG funds,
Continue to
Commissioner
fund
Robinson.
it.
Continue to fund what?
Well, I would like to continue to raise the standard of Lake Worth. I'm hoping that the code will be able to continue if we don't, if the consensus is not to fund CDBG money to code. I'm fine with that. I just wanted to say that parks are important, and if we can do this, with penny sales tax, let's do it.
I'm just going to restate what I said last year during the CDBG discussions, CDBG. First of all, to have a continuous funding of CDBG to fund positions and jobs that the city should be providing for on its own. It makes no sense to use that money that's been allocated for the most poorest and most impoverished sections of our city. It's made to improve their quality of life, and it's not meant to run a program that should be run by the city budget on its own, okay? I wasn't comfortable with the first time. I said we were in such dire need because we didn't have any code enforcement. We had been completely depleted of code enforcement people. I accepted it on a one term. I was not happy about it the last time. I wanted to use it for streets and sidewalks. Like I mentioned, the A Street just kills me. But there's a lot of different things. We still have a lot of programs. When we did that $40 million road bond, the streets that were supposed to be the good streets that didn't need the road bond, they're falling into disrepair already, and some of them are not covered by the bond. So I was kind of thinking that in the CDBG areas, something to think about for the future. But we made a promise to Royal Point Sienna, and I made a promise to you all to create a park within walking distance to every neighborhood in the community. But we also, so I'm gonna push that, and I'm gonna honor my commitment to doing that. But other things to think about for the penny sales tax to me are, what I've been wanting and trying to do through outside methods with nonprofit agencies, we need a community center. We need 2 community centers. We need, I've been working on trying to get VPK programs and after-school programs for middle schoolers to the north, at least one in the north and the south end of the city. These kids in middle school, they don't have any place to go. They're not involved in the programs. They have nothing to happen there. And the VPK, we're losing our kids in 3rd grade because there's not enough VPK for them. And most of them are English as speakers of other languages. And we need to have programs that can be used as community centers, resume builders for older people, teaching, cater to the kids after school, and then cater to the VPK. So you want to talk about a good investment in your dollars is putting it in your future and in your kids and your families. We have to start being clear about community center, at least one to start with. And if we can discuss public-private partnerships with non-private agencies, to actually come in, and I know that's a forbidden word in here, but, a lot of cities get a lot of really good stuff done with teaming up with nonprofit agencies, to help with some of these things. I'll gladly name a building, anybody who wants to put money down to help create a center for our kids to do something amazing in, we have to start being progressive that way too, and thinking that we have so many kids in our neighborhood and they need extra help. And I resent anybody saying, anyone who's known me and followed me around this whole years that I've been here knows that I've spent most of my time west of the tracks in the most impoverished sections of our city, focusing every dollar, every greenway, every roadway project, every dollar to the neighborhood. So I don't want to even have a discussion about that. We know what our needs are. I made a promise. Point Siena definitely deserves a park. It was funded in the budget. Now let's fund it with CDBG and do what we said we were going to do. But in that note, we also promised when we created Domino Park, there's no parks anywhere around there, right? When we created Domino Park, that they were going to get a bathroom in Domino Park. We said that a long time ago, and nobody ever revisited that. And there's no bathrooms in that area for that park space, just to keep something for future. But let's start talking about it. Now, back to the Parks Master Plan. I don't think that this is the be-all, the end-all, the whatever. We can do what we need to do in the meantime. But just like our roadway system, when we talk about maintenance, we have to come up with sorts. I like what Mr. Del Sol was talking about. Is he still here? No. But I'm saying we have to create a maintenance program for the parks. We don't want to end up in the quagmire that we had the last time around when we had all these pocket parks and things and people were not taking care of them. They promised to take care of them and they didn't. And we had a lot of issues. I want to make sure that if the city's going to create parks, it better damn well be responsible for maintaining it and keeping it green and doing. We also talked about fruit trees in our greenways. Haven't seen any fruit trees in our greenways. Haven't seen, let's do what we said. Somebody mentioned benches. Let's start. We're asking everybody else to elevate their game. Let's elevate our game. If we're going to create a green space of any kind, make it something that people can use. Pick a piece of fruit, sit down under a tree, read a book, do something, but have it be valuable, not just, oh yeah, that's a greenway. Big deal. You know what I mean? Let it be usable for some reason. That's what we're good at. But we have to maintain them. So anyway.
Is there a consensus?
I believe there is a consensus. It seems Mr. Hardy said before he left that he was somewhat okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, he sure did.
I'd say there was a consensus. Okay, we good? You guys got what you need? All right, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate your speaking out, and thank you for being a part of the public meeting process also. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
You don't need a motion, do you?
Yes, I do.
Huh? Not for a workshop, you don't.
On a workshop? Never mind.
Because there are no motions at a workshop.
We need to get that
There we go.
down because it keeps changing.